Hey guys, Darren Sugiyama here, CEO and founder of Landsmark Capital, the most transparent premium financing intermediary in the life insurance industry. So today we're going to take a look at a case study. In this particular case, the client was looking for a low point net $10 million in death benefit. And what I found really interesting about this particular case is that the advisor wanted to take a look at two different carriers. One of the carriers is National Life Group, who has a really great product, really great people, and a really well-run company. And then we're going to look at what I'm going to call Carrier X. Now, I did a webinar a few weeks ago where I referred to Carrier X, comparing a different product. But in this particular case, Carrier X is not the same Carrier X as my last webinar. I'm just using Carrier X as a placeholder as to not disclose who this carrier with the inferior outcome is. To be fair, I am an independent entity. I have no allegiances towards any particular company. No one pays me for my opinion on promoting one company versus the other. This is purely mathematics. This is purely analytical. And in this particular case, National Life Group was the undisputed winner. So as we go through this case, think about cases that you have where the client is looking to generate a tax-free death benefit outside the taxable estate, usually inside an irrevocable life insurance trust, otherwise known as an ILIT. So we'll take a look at this case and then we'll do the comparison, National Life Group versus this other Carrier X. Hope you guys enjoy this webinar. Okay, so this case study, the client was looking to achieve a $10 million low point net death benefit using our first dollar financing loan design. This is where the client is going to borrow 100% of the premium. They're going to pay the interest out of pocket to the lender each year, and then we are going to exit the loan in year 16, policy year 16. So let's go ahead and take a look. In this design, the client is going to borrow $700,000 per year in annual premium from the lender. They are going to pay interest out of pocket. And in this particular case, we are starting off with today's lending rate with one of our particular lenders. With this particular case, the lending rate would be 6.13%. Starting in year two, we're going to use the 20-year prime average rate, again, over the most recent 20-year period, which is 4.78%. And in all of our designs, we show three different interest rate environments. I'll get to that in the next slide. But on this particular slide, we're going to use the 20-year average prime rate starting in the second year. The client is going to post collateral, and we see that collateral peak out at $940,000 in policy year 6. And as I said, we are exiting the loan here in policy year 16 using the policy values. As you see in the second to the far right-hand column, that is the death benefit net of loans. In other words, the gross death benefit is actually greater than those numbers there. I am backing out the loan balance, and so the death benefit net of loans means exactly that. That is the net amount that would go to the beneficiary after the lender has recovered the outstanding loan balance. As I said before, we do show three different borrowing rate environments. The first one, we use today's rate, and this particular lender uses the 12-month CME term SOFR rate as the index. And as of March 31st, 2025, when we ran this particular design, that 12-month CME term SOFR rate was 4.01%. And you see that in the yellow box at the very top of the screen there. This particular lender's spread was 2.12%. And so we add the 12-month CME term SOFR rate plus the lender spread together, and that gives us the current borrowing rate with this particular case on this particular date of 6.13%. So as I said before, in column 2A, we start off in policy year 1 using that 6.13%, or whatever the current rate is with the particular lender that we're going to use. And then in this particular case, right below that in years 2 and on, we are using the 20-year average prime rate at 4.78%. Now, that is a pretty low rate. And so we are going to show two additional interest rate environments. The second environment here, we're going to use, again, that 6.13% because that is the rate as of the point where we ran this illustration. And then starting in year 2, we're going to drop the ongoing rate by 100 basis points. So we have 5.13%. on an ongoing basis. And then on the far right-hand side, we have interest rate environment number 3, where again, we use today's rate in policy years 1, and then we increase that rate in perpetuity. So we have an increasing rate each year. It increases, increases, increases. In this particular case, by the time we get out to year 15, we're showing the borrowing rate at 7.20%. Now, I would say that's a pretty pessimistic outcome. I don't think anyone in their right mind, in my humble opinion, believes that interest rates are going to continually increase for the next 15 years. Most people think we're pretty much at the high point, and we're already seeing rates start to decrease at the time that I'm recording this particular webinar. This is July 16th, 2025. So we'll see what happens in the near future with borrowing interest rates. However, like I said, we are seeing a decline in rates over the last 6 months or so. But in any case, in all of our proposals, we always show 3 different interest rates environments. And the reason is we want to document the fact that we did discuss fluctuating borrowing interest rates with the client. The last thing you want to do in premium financing is to only show one interest rate environment to the client. And you know how clients will have selective memory as time goes on. They're going to erroneously remember, but they're going to say or accuse you of showing a low borrowing interest rate as if somehow that low borrowing interest rate was somehow guaranteed, which we all know in most cases that rate is not guaranteed fixed. It is usually a floating rate. Just on a sidebar here, we do multi-year fixed rates. Currently, right now, actually last month, one of our lenders was offering a 5-year fixed rate at 5.85%. Now, the interesting thing about fixed rates is that with that particular lender, if the 5-year fixed rate was 5.85% and their floating rate was a little over 6.15% at that time, whenever you see a floating rate that's higher than the fixed rate, what that really tells you is the investment bankers of the world that are backing these fixed loans are essentially anticipating that the floating rate is going to float way down below the fixed rate. Otherwise, they would be intentionally losing money. And as far as I can tell, these investment banking firms are not in the business of losing money. So it's kind of one thing to consider when you have a client that maybe will be asking for a fixed rate. Again, if the fixed rate is less than the current floating rate, that's a good indication that that floating rate is going to decrease, most likely much lower than that floating rate, which is good news for folks that are getting into premium financing right now, clients, I mean. Okay, so back to the program here. Again, we're using the average prime rate in interest rate environment number 1 over the last 20 years. The second interest rate environment, we're using the current rate minus 100 basis points. And then the third interest rate environment, we're showing the current rate in year 1, and then we see that perpetual rate increase. Again, I think that is extremely pessimistic. I do not think that is realistic, but I do want that documented in the official client proposal because we can always go back and prove that we did talk to the client about variable interest rates. Okay, this is another page out of our standard proposal when we are designing an estate tax planning type of case. On this particular page, we're showing a starting account balance of $10 million in their investment portfolio. We are assuming that both the managed money as well as the policy index, that they're both crediting, in this case, 6.45%. We're assuming in the managed portfolio that the advisor is charging an all-in investment fee of 1.35%, which would be an advisor fee of about 50 basis points, and then plus the fund manager fee and the broker-dealer fee. So 1.35% is very low. We are assuming an average capital gains tax of 40.6%. And in this particular case, we are not assuming any estate taxes due. So instead of a 40% estate tax drag on the whole thing, in this particular case, we're just showing 0%. Now, in most estate planning cases like this, the client's net worth is above that threshold wherein the bulk of their net worth is going to be taxed at 40% in estate taxes. In this particular case, again, we're showing 0% estate taxes. Now, here's the interesting thing, another sidebar here. Here's another interesting thing to kind of contemplate when it comes to estate taxes. Now, sometimes I will show a 40% estate tax drag when we're comparing assets like this. However, one of the arguments that money managers will often have is they'll say, well, yes, you're going to put the life insurance policy in an islet outside the taxable estate and all that, but you're not really being fair if you're going to tax the managed portfolio at 40%, because we could easily just move the managed portfolio into an irrevocable trust, up to the gifting exemption limit. And that's true. However, no one was talking about doing that until we came along and started talking about putting a life insurance policy in an islet, right? Their money manager wasn't already in the process of moving or gifting up to the maximum gifting exemption of their managed portfolio into an irrevocable trust, right? They weren't already planning to do that. So in this particular case we're looking at on the screen, I'm going to assume that the money manager was already in the process of moving money out of the taxable state into an irrevocable trust, into a new managed portfolio, right? We know that doesn't happen in most cases, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt in this particular case here. So that's why I have 0% estate taxes. Okay. So the blue column on the left-hand side, that is that $10 million portfolio with no life insurance, growing at 6.45% gross. We are assuming a 1.35% all-in investment fee assumption, and we are assuming a 40.6% capital gains tax drag over time, and 0 estate taxes. In the green section, we're showing the exact same $10 million portfolio. And all we're doing in the middle column in that green section is we're peeling off a teeny weeny little bit to pay the interest expense on the premium finance loan. And so in the right-hand column in that green section, that is the investment portfolio, right, minus the cost of the interest payments going to the premium financing lender, plus the death benefit net of loans. So in other words, the green section is the same exact portfolio, but we're just trading out some of that cash to implement the premium financed life insurance policy incorporated into the overall portfolio. The graph on the right-hand side is pretty powerful here. The blue line assumes the portfolio with no life insurance inside the portfolio, and the green line assumes the same exact investment portfolio, same growth assumptions, same everything, but including the life insurance policy. And again, the premium finance interest is being deducted from that portfolio. So we're really showing an apples to apples comparison here. Huge difference over time, and by the time we get out to the 40th year, that would put the client at age 88. We're talking about almost a $10 million difference between the portfolio with the premium finance life insurance policy and the portfolio without any life insurance whatsoever. And again, that's the blue line. So pretty compelling. Okay, as we move on here, we're going to get into that carrier comparison that I told you about. Again, in this case, the advisor wanted to see a different carrier besides National Life Group. Again, we're just going to call that Carrier X. And Carrier X really underperforms here compared to National Life Group. From a net face amount standpoint, 10 million and 10 million right off of the bat. And to get there, here's where the difference really starts here. National Life Group, to get that same $10 million face amount, required an annual premium of $700,000 a year for 10 years. Carrier X actually required $950,000 in annual premium for 10 years. So big difference from a cost standpoint. Same thing with collateral here. The peak collateral expected in National Life Group design was $934,000. Carrier X required a $1.2 million peak collateral amount. So big difference there. After we pay the loan off, and this was another big difference, after we pay the premium financing loan off, the low point death benefit in the National Life Group design was $13.4 million versus carrier X was only 10.6 million. And then the total interest paid by the client, because the National Life Group policy required so much less premium. Again, it was 700,000 a year for 10 years versus carrier X was $950,000 per year. The total interest paid by the client with National Life Group was only 3.5 million versus carrier X was 4.3 million. Again, that's to get the same net $10 million in net face amount right off the bat. And then as time went on, after the premium financing loan was paid off, the National Life Group low point death benefit, if we go back to that slide, was 13.4 million versus carrier X was only 10.6 million. So huge difference from a cost standpoint, huge difference in outcomes from a low point death benefit standpoint. This is kind of the summary of all the numbers we just went over there. But pretty obvious that National Life Group radically outperformed carrier X here. Another note when it comes to carriers, yes, the illustrations are important. Yes, the policy construction is important. The policy charges are important. All of those things are important, right? The caps, IUL caps are important. Even the multiplier bonuses and the associated asset-based charges are important. All those things are important. And oh, by the way, carrier X does not have any multiplier options at all. But all those things, though, as important as the policy design, construction, and chassis are, one of the things I look for are how does the carrier treat the clients from a historical standpoint, and how does the carrier treat the advisors from a historical standpoint? And in premium financing, how does the carrier treat premium financing as a whole, not only from a lender standpoint, but also from an intermediary standpoint? These are all things I think that are super important when it comes to picking the right partners on a move forward basis. The reality is when it comes to premium financing, you really want to pick the right carrier and the right lender and the right premium financing intermediary that you trust in all of these different categories. Because again, just about anything can put anything down on paper or on a pretty little spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. But you're really trusting that all three parties involved in a premium financing type of proposition are going to be there for you in the future. You don't want to be associated with companies, carriers, banks, premium financing intermediaries that don't have that solid reputation of doing the right thing and treating people the right way. So to me, this is very important. I look for long-term lasting relationships. And those long-term lasting relationships start with trust, and they start with loyalty, and they start with doing the right thing, and they start with doing things in an honorable way. And if you know anything about me, as well as my Japanese samurai background, these are things that are so paramount in not only the way that we do business, but also in the way that we live our lives. And so I really believe in picking the right partners across the board when it comes to doing really any sort of business, but specifically premium financing. You have to pick the right carrier with the right product, you have to pick the right lender, and you have to pick the right premium financing intermediary. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this webinar. Again, this is Darren Sugiyama of Lions Mark Capital. If you have any cases wherein the client is looking to generate the maximum death benefit inside an irrevocable life insurance trust, go ahead and reach out to us at lionsmarkcapital.com. Not only do we do estate tax planning cases, we also do LIRP style cases or life insurance retirement plan type cases. For more information about that, you can go to one of our new websites, and that is rothish.com, ROTHISH.com. Again, hope you enjoyed this webinar and enjoy the rest of your day.